I'm sitting in front of a map of Luzon Island, the main island of the Philippines. It was published in 1850 in Madrid, Spain. It's part of 3 maps that was the first comprehensive maps ever published on the Philippines. The Philippines is a very special country for me for many reasons. For it is here that I began my first entrepreneurial adventure in 1988 in the outskirts of Manila. Manila's right here at the base of Manila Bay. I began manufacturing commercial food service equipment. And it wasn't long before McDonald's, the largest restaurant chain in the world, came calling. They were looking to localize the manufacturing of their kitchens in Asia because of the huge explosion of business that they were planning for. Before long, we won the contract, the exclusive contract, to build their restaurants in this very exciting part of the world. From 50 employees to more than 500 employees overnight, our company grew very, very rapidly. But we were also on a collision with history. For this was the time of the people power revolution. There were right-wing coups, there were communist insurgents, and there was civil unrest every day. You know, my job was to manage chaos, and there was certainly enough of it to go around. For instance, there was corruption everywhere, at all levels of society, grinding poverty, oh, just such gripping poverty everywhere you looked. It just tore your heart out. The labor unions were infiltrated by the communists. And when you were an American company, they made your life very, very difficult. Extortion being one of the things that they practiced. And then there was a lack of infrastructure, of roads, of electric to power our facility. As I said, an entrepreneur's first job is to manage chaos, and I certainly had plenty of it on my hands. But I was to get a call that was to shake me to the core. I was called to the U.S. Embassy to meet with the station chief of the CIA. For this was a time that the American bases at Clark Field and Subic Bay were under negotiation for their extinction. And the communists, sequestered deep into the jungles of Luzon, were sending what was called sparrow units to Manila to hunt and to assassinate or kidnap Americans. The CIA officer, in a very somber voice, told me, "Neal, we believe that you're a target." I got to tell you, at the time, I didn't realize how impactful that was. I was an American entrepreneur. I could do anything. I could walk through walls. I could handle anything that anyone ever threw at me. You know, every entrepreneur will have a rendezvous with fear, but it wasn't this sort of fear that I was expecting. You know, one night, as I sat in the back of my SUV, zigzagging through the streets of Manila to try to change my time and departure every day and not to have any sort of routine that I could be tracked, I felt scared for the first time, really. It sank into me that it wasn't only me, but I was fearful of my wife and my 2 young daughters, of my company. What would happen? After all, I was pretty much a sitting duck. And I thought back to the most important lesson that I ever learned. I got my first dream job at a very young age, just as I graduated to university, as the sales manager for one of the obscure divisions of Inchcape, a very large British trading firm that was very active throughout the Asia area. And before long, I was on my way to my new home in Singapore. And as a salesman of this company, I traveled the byways, the remote cities of Asia, places like Chiang Mai and Surabaya and Cebu, and also the capital cities of Asia I knew like the back of my hand, places like Bangkok and Jakarta, Kuala Lumpur, and Manila. I got back on one of my trips to be debriefed by my boss and his boss. My boss was a very fascinating man. He was an Hungarian Jew that escaped communism under the most extreme of circumstances. He spoke 7 languages and told these most fascinating stories. At night, he held court. I wanted more than anything one day to be like him. And his boss, his name was John, this very dour Englishman who wore these cockamamie bow ties and spoke in this very, very deliberate sort of voice. It made me anxious every time he talked. You know, during one of these briefings, I leaned over to Hugo and I said, Hugo, John doesn't deserve to be leading us. In fact, he should be your boss. And now I knew when Hugo was going to give me a real thrashing. You know, he wore these thick black-rimmed glasses that kind of magnified his steely gray eyes. And he quickly looked at me and he said, Neal, your mind is nothing but meaningless mush. You have no ideas the pressure that John is under. Do not think for 1 second you are tough enough to fill his shoes. For youth and hard work alone will not make you successful. What you must determine from this day forward is, will you ever be tough enough? You know, at the time, I did not really know the wisdom that Hugo was imparting upon me. But as I was driving through Manila that evening, fearing for my family, my company, and my life, I knew what Hugo meant to be tough enough about me having my rendezvous with fear and deciding deep inside how I would deal with it. You know, tough enough for me has come to mean many, many different things. Are you tough enough to handle the pressure? Like being deep below the ocean surface at 180 feet. You know, your mind starts playing games on you. Will you make it to the surface? Are you tough enough to block out all the fears? Are you tough enough to compete against the world? As an American entrepreneur, it is us against the world. Our government does not support us nearly like the Japanese, the British, the Germans. The Chinese government supports their business. We have to strap on our guns each day and go out there. It's us against the world. Are you tough enough to hold on to your entrepreneurial dream? You know, because all your resources are going to run out well before your entrepreneurial dream is launched. The only thing that you will have is your passion. You know, I've asked myself over and over many times, am I tough enough? You know, there are legions of American small businesses and American entrepreneurs out there that has learned the lesson of what it means to be tough enough. You know, American small businesses have generated more than 70% of new American jobs over the last decade. They're responsible for 13 times more patents per employee than large companies. They are the repository of American ingenuity, creativity, and job generation. Yet, they get no parades. They hardly get any recognition at all. Heck, the president even hardly mentions them. Yet they have always been there, and they have always been carrying the burden for America. It is time that we recharge, that we regenerate, that we reinvigorate the American entrepreneurial spirit and bring them out from where they are. They are sitting on the sidelines. They want to get engaged. They want to get involved. They're just waiting for the visionary leadership that today is so lacking in our country. We're so fortunate to have them. They are the envy of the world. We must do whatever we need to give them the confidence to invest, to do the things that they've always done so well. And the benefit to this country will be historic. It is not big government. It is not the growth of government bureaucracy that will get this country back on its feet, but it is those entrepreneurs that has learned the lesson of what it means to be tough enough that is the greatest asset to this country.